Aliens Invade Academy. Human sends them packing. A personal account recorded by Zarveth Tarn, graduate of GEA, Class 7, Group 432. Transcribed for archival purposes, GSY 12487. My name is Zarveth Tarn. I am a Morphak, and I am terrified of almost everything. This is not a character flaw. It is a biological imperative. Morphaks evolved on a planet called Vethis Minor, a world of gentle breezes and soft rainfall, where the most dangerous predator is a mildly aggressive herbivore. Our fight or flight response is weighted approximately 98% toward flight. When faced with danger, we run. When faced with mild inconvenience, we consider running. When faced with a social interaction we did not prepare for, we run mentally, if not physically. This context is important because it explains my reaction when I first met Jake Hawkins. I was a senior at the Galactic Education Academy, majoring in xenological engineering. The academy was the finest institution of its kind in known space, a sprawling complex of crystalline towers and floating transit platforms on the neutral world of Nexus Station. 30,000 students from 200 species studied there. The curriculum covered everything from quantum mechanics to alien biology to the proper diplomatic protocols for first contact situations. I had been there for 3 standard cycles. I had my routine. I had my safe spaces. I had a carefully curated list of low-stimulation cafeterias where I could eat without the anxiety of unexpected social demands. Then Jake arrived, and my carefully constructed world collapsed. The Galactic Education Academy accepted students from all council species. The Morphak Homeworld Council had sponsored my application because they believed exposure to other species would help me overcome my natural timidity. It had not. 3 years in, I had learned to function around other species, but I still preferred observation from a safe distance. I mention all of this because when the human arrived, I was the first student to meet him. I was in the main registration hall, submitting my course preferences for the upcoming term, when the doors opened and he walked in. The hall was a massive circular chamber with a transparent ceiling that showed the swirling nebula Nexus Station orbited. Representatives from a dozen species stood in orderly queues at the registration terminals, speaking in hushed tones. The human did not queue. The human did not speak in hushed tones. He was tall by human standards, approximately 1.8 meters, though I later learned this was slightly above average for his species. His hair was a shade of brown that reminded me of dried Vethian bark. His eyes scanned the room with an intensity that made my secondary eyelids flutter. He carried a single bag over his shoulder and wore clothing that seemed designed for function rather than aesthetics, a worn jacket with multiple pockets, sturdy trousers, and boots that looked like they had seen significant use. He walked directly to the nearest registration terminal, bypassing a queue of 3 Quarrens who had been waiting patiently for 15 minutes. The Quarrens did not complain. They shifted their bioluminescence to anxious yellow and stepped aside. The human did not notice. He was too busy reading the terminal display with the focus of a predator studying its prey. I was standing at the adjacent terminal. I could not help but watch. He was holding a paper form, actual physical paper, which I had not seen in years, and reading it as he filled it out. He muttered the fields under his breath as he went. Species, human. Homeworld, Earth. Class 12 Deathworld. Program, Alien Engineering. Age, 19. He paused, looked at the age field, and wrote something down with a small smirk. 19. He was 19. Most students at the academy were at least 30 standard cycles old when they enrolled. The Quarrens in the queue he had bypassed were 70 and 80 respectively, and this child from a death world had just walked past them like they were furniture. He finished his registration in under 2 minutes. Then he turned, spotted me watching, and smiled. I have since learned that human smiles are friendly gestures. At the time, I was certain he was about to eat me. "Hey," he said. "I am Jake. You know where the dorms are?" I pointed. My hand was shaking. "Thanks, buddy." He clapped me on the shoulder. Physical contact with a stranger, something that would have caused a diplomatic incident on most civilized worlds, and walked off in the direction I had indicated. I stood there for a full minute, processing what had just happened. A Deathworlder had touched me. A Class 12 apex predator had initiated physical contact, and I was still alive. The Quarrens returned to their terminal, their bioluminescence shifting back to calm blue. They seemed relieved the human had moved on. The first week of classes was an educational experience for everyone. Jake enrolled in 5 courses: Introduction to Xenological Engineering, Advanced Materials Science, Starship Propulsion Theory, Galactic History, and a lab course in Practical Fabrication. He attended every lecture, sat in the front row of every class, and asked questions that range from insightful to terrifying. In Galactic History, the professor mentioned the fall of the Kryn Empire, which had collapsed 30,000 years ago due to internal conflict. Jake raised his hand. What were the specific resource allocation failures that led to their economic collapse? Was it agricultural, industrial, or a combination? The professor, an elderly Kryn named Instructor Valden, stared at him for several seconds. That is a remarkably specific question for a first-week student. I read the available literature on the flight. Over, Jake said. There's a gap in the analysis regarding supply chain vulnerabilities during the final century of the Empire. I was hoping you could fill it in. Instructor Val then did not fill it in. He did not know. No one in the class knew. Jake had asked a question that would have challenged a doctoral candidate. Word of this spread. By the end of the first week, the faculty had held 2 emergency meetings about the human student. The students had held 3. A group of Vorith engineering majors attempted to befriend Jake by presenting him with a gift, a crystalline structure that their species considered a symbol of intellectual kinship. Jake accepted it, examined it, and asked if they had considered using a different crystal lattice configuration for improved energy transmission. The Voriths were simultaneously impressed and offended. A Harkon student challenged Jake to a debate on the ethical implications of FTL travel disrupting local space-time. The debate lasted 3 hours. The Harkon student conceded at the end, citing exhaustion. Jake offered to continue the next day. The Harkon declined. Word spread quickly. By evening, every student on Nexus Station knew about the human. The Academy communication networks buzzed with speculation and concern. A group of Vorith students held an emergency meeting to discuss safety protocols. 3 Drax students, large, muscular beings from a high-gravity world, announced they would be carrying defensive equipment at all times. The faculty held their own meeting. I learned later that Professor Zarveth Tarn, the Academy's Dean of Student Affairs, argued strongly against admitting the human. He was overruled by the Galactic Education Board, who saw humanity's junior membership as an opportunity for cultural exchange. I did not see Jake for the first 3 days after his arrival. I heard about him. Everyone heard about him. He attended an introductory xenobiology lecture and asked so many questions that the professor ran out of class time. He visited the engineering labs and spent 4 hours examining a standard FTL drive core. He ate in the main cafeteria and sampled food from 17 different species before settling on something that looked like fried tuber slices. He tried to befriend a group of Ryloth students by showing them pictures of Earth animals. The Ryloths had to be sedated after viewing images of something called a honey badger. On the 4th day, I encountered him again. I was in the South Engineering Annex, working on a propulsion calculation for my Advanced Drive Theory class. The annex was quiet. As usual, most students preferred the main lab facilities. I had chosen this location specifically because it was unpopular and therefore low stress. Jake was in the annex. He was lying on the floor beneath a deactivated teaching reactor, his upper body wedged into the maintenance access panel. Only his legs were visible. They were kicking occasionally. "Hello," I said. His voice echoed from inside the panel. "Hey, just a sec." There was a loud clang, a brief flash of light, and a puff of smoke. Jake slid out from under the reactor, holding a component I recognized as a primary flux regulator. It was sparking gently. "This design is terrible," he said cheerfully. "The regulator is positioned behind the cooling manifold, which means you have to disassemble half the reactor to replace it. On a human ship, we put this on an external access panel. 30-second swap." He stood up, brushed dust off his jacket, and finally seemed to register who he was talking to. "Oh, hey, You're the guy who pointed me to the dorms. Zarveth, right? I was surprised he remembered my name. Yes. Cool. I'm Jake. He extended his hand toward me. I stared at it. It's a handshake, he said. Human greeting. You take my hand and move it up and down. I knew what a handshake was. I had read about them in my cultural orientation materials. I had simply never expected to be offered one. I took his hand. His grip was firm, but not painful. We moved our hands up and down once. Great, he said, releasing my hand. We're friends now. That's how it works. I was fairly certain that was not how friendships worked among any known species, but I did not argue. Over the following weeks, I became something I had never expected to be, the human's primary social contact at the academy. I was not his only friend. He made an effort to befriend everyone, but I was the one he sought out most frequently. I think he appreciated that I did not react to him with fear or hostility. I reacted with mild anxiety, which he apparently interpreted as a comfortable baseline. He would find me in the engineering annex and ask about my projects. He would explain human engineering concepts with enthusiasm that bordered on mania. He would drag me to the cafeteria and insist I try food from his world. Chocolate, apparently, was a delicacy that humans had elevated to an art form, and he had brought several bars from Earth. The chocolate was good. I did not tell him that. I did not want to encourage him. One afternoon in the annex, Jake's datapad chimed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted to something I had not seen before, a mix of affection and resignation. "It is my mother," he said. "I have to take this." He answered. The voice on the other end was sharp and warm at the same time, a sound that carried across the quiet room without effort. "Jacob Hawkins," his mother said. "Are you terrifying the aliens?" Jake winced. "I'm not terrifying anyone, Mom. We are studying. Do not lie to me. I know you. You are probably explaining something at double speed and waving your hand around. Slow down. Breathe. They are not used to you yet." "Yes, Mom. And do not eat the Ryloth fermented fungus bread. Remember what happened last time you tried alien cuisine. You were removed from school for 3 days." Jake's face reddened. "Mom, I'm just saying. Stick to the chocolate. You know that agrees with you." The call ended. Jake looked at me. I pretended I had not heard anything. He cleared his throat. "So, more chocolate?" The other students largely avoided Jake. This was not out of malice. It was out of survival instinct. Humans were Class 12 Deathworld natives. Everything about them suggested danger. Their reflexes were too fast. Their tolerance for pain was too high. Their enthusiasm for physical activity was deeply unsettling. A group of Duran engineering students once challenged Jake to a strength competition, confident that their high-gravity physiology would give them an advantage. Jake declined 3 times before reluctantly agreeing. He lifted twice the weight of the strongest Theran student, then asked if they wanted to try endurance running instead. The Therans declined. After that, the avoidance intensified. Not hostility, just distance. Jake noticed, of course. Humans are observant, but he did not complain. He simply focused on his studies and spent his social time with the few students willing to interact with him. He tried, on several occasions, to bridge the gap. He brought food to share in the cafeteria. He offered to help students with their engineering projects. He even attempted to organize a study group for first-year propulsion theory. The study group was attended by exactly 2 students, me and a Ryloth who had misread the sign-up sheet and was too embarrassed to leave. Jake was not discouraged. He taught the study session anyway. He covered propulsion theory for 2 hours, drawing diagrams on a datapad and explaining concepts with a patience that surprised me. The Ryloth student, whose name was Varnak, later told me it was the most useful study session he had ever attended. He did not attend another one, but he appreciated the gesture. I was the most consistent of those students. This was not because I was brave. It was because I had already been claimed as a friend and could not figure out how to politely withdraw. There was one other student who did not avoid Jake. Her name was Thalassa Vex. She was a Quaran, and she was in Jake's alien engineering cohort. The Quarans, as a species, are naturally curious and remarkably fearless for beings who communicate through bioluminescent skin patterns. Thalassa was particularly curious. She approached Jake during the second week of classes, introduced herself, and asked if he would help her understand human engineering principles. She had noticed that human design systems had a fundamentally different design philosophy from those of other species, more redundant, more robust, more focused on survivability than efficiency. Jake was delighted. He spent 3 hours explaining human engineering concepts to her, drawing diagrams on a datapad, referencing historical examples, and occasionally laughing at his own explanations. Thalassa listened with genuine interest, her bioluminescence cycling through patterns of fascination and understanding. They became study partners after that. They worked on projects together, exchanged notes, and debated engineering philosophy in the cafeteria. Thalassa was one of the few students who could match Jake's intellectual energy without being overwhelmed by his presence. This is important context for what happened next. There was an instructor at the academy named Professor Varnak. He was a Ryloth, a species known for their rigid social hierarchies and sensitivity to perceived disrespect. Professor Varnak taught advanced xenological systems, a required course for alien engineering majors. He did not like humans. This became apparent during the 3rd week of classes. Jake and Thalassa were working on a group project analyzing the structural integrity of various alien hull configurations. Jake had completed his analysis of Ryloth designs and presented findings that were, by his own admission, critical. Your hull designs prioritize energy efficiency over structural redundancy, he said during the presentation. This means a single catastrophic failure in one section can cascade through the entire vessel. Human ships use segmented bulkheads with emergency seals. If one section breaches, the rest stays intact. Your ships would benefit from a similar approach. Professor Varnak's facial ridges darkened, a Ryloth expression of anger. You are suggesting that Ryloth engineering is inferior. I'm suggesting it could be improved, Jake said. That's why I'm here. To learn from you and share what we know. The humans have been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. You are in no position to critique 6,000 years of Ryloth engineering tradition. Jake considered this carefully. Respectfully, Professor, you've been using the same hull design for 3,000 years. We've redesigned ours 17 times in the last 100 years alone. Each iteration improved on the last. I'm not saying your approach is wrong. I'm saying there might be lessons we can learn from each other. The class was silent. Professor Varnak's ridges darkened further. See me after class, he said. I was not in that class, but I heard about it from Thalassa. She told me that Professor Varnak had kept Jake for an hour afterward, attempting to intimidate him into submission. It did not work. Jake had politely stood his ground, citing specific examples from Ryloth naval history where design flaws had led to ship losses. The tension between them escalated over the following weeks. Professor Varnak began singling Jake out during lectures, asking deliberately difficult questions, and grading his assignments more harshly than those of other students. Jake responded by answering every question correctly and submitting work that was objectively excellent. Thalassa became collateral damage. Professor Varnak could not directly target Jake without appearing biased, so he targeted Jake's study partner instead. He criticized Thalassa's work in ways that were technically valid, but disproportionately harsh. He assigned her the most difficult problems. He called on her during lectures and interrupted her answers. Thalassa, being a Quoran, responded with patience and grace. She completed her assignments. She answered his questions. She absorbed his criticism without complaint, until the day she could not. It happened during a lab session. Thalassa was running a structural stress simulation on a Quoran-designed hull configuration. The simulation parameters required precise input, and Thalassa made a minor error, a misplaced decimal in the material density constant. The simulation produced unrealistic results. The virtual hull collapsed at 30% of expected stress tolerance. Professor Varnak noticed immediately. He walked to her workstation, examined the results, and began a critique that quickly escalated beyond professional boundaries. Your species has produced engineers for 10,000 years, he said, loud enough for the entire lab to hear. And you cannot enter a single constant correctly? Perhaps the Quoran reputation for precision is overstated. Thalassa's bioluminescence flickered, a sign of distress. Apologies, Professor. I will correct the error. Correcting the error is not the issue. The issue is that you do not take your work seriously. You spend your time with the human instead of focusing on your studies. It is affecting your performance. That is not fair, Thalassa said quietly. My grades in other classes are excellent. Your grades in my class are adequate. There's a difference. He continued his critique for several more minutes, his voice growing louder, his words more cutting. The other students in the lab pretended to focus on their own work. No one intervened. Jake was across the lab, working on his own simulation. He had been watching the interaction since it began, his posture growing increasingly tense. When Professor Varnak told Thalassa that perhaps she should reconsider her choice of major, Jake stood up. Professor, he said, that is enough. Varnak turned to face him. Excuse me? You are not critiquing her work. You are humiliating her. There is a difference. You do not tell me how to instruct my students, human. I am not telling you how to instruct. I'm telling you to stop bullying my friend. The word hung in the air. Bullying. It was a human concept, one that did not translate cleanly into galactic standard. The closest equivalent in Ryloth language was something like disciplinary intensity, which had neutral or even positive connotations. Varnak's facial ridges went through several shades in quick succession. You're accusing me of. I'm stating a fact. Jake stepped closer. He was shorter than the Ryloth by a significant margin, but humans carry themselves differently from other species. They do not yield space. They claim it. She made a minor error in a simulation parameter. She acknowledged it. She offered to fix it. You have been attacking her for 5 minutes. That stops now. Varnak's hand moved before he could think about it. It was a Ryloth reflex, a dismissive gesture intended to push the offending party aside. On Ryloth, it was the equivalent of a verbal reprimand. Among other species, it was physical assault. His hand connected with Jake's chest. Jake did not move. He stood there, looking at Varnak's hand as if it were an interesting specimen. Then he looked up at the Ryloth's face. Professor, he said, his voice calm, almost conversational. I'm going to give you one warning. If you touch me again, I will respond. Varnak was not accustomed to being threatened. He pushed harder. What happened next was documented by the lab security system. I have reviewed the recording multiple times. Jake's left hand caught Varnak's wrist and redirected it. His right hand formed a fist and delivered a single strike to Varnak's jaw, a precise application of force to a specific nerve cluster that humans call a hook punch. It was not a full-strength strike. Jake later told me he used approximately 30% of his maximum force. It was enough. Varnak's eyes rolled back. His body went limp. He collapsed to the floor in a controlled fall that Jake guided to prevent head injury. The lab was completely silent. Jake stood over the unconscious instructor, his fists still clenched, breathing slowly and deliberately. He looked down at Varnak, then at Thalassa, then at the other students who were staring in shock. He will wake up in a few minutes, Jake said. You'll have a headache and some bruising, but no permanent damage. I aim for the least dangerous knockout point. He looked at Thalassa. I'm sorry you had to see that. I should have handled it differently. But I could not stand there and let him keep hurting you. Thalassa's bioluminescence was cycling through patterns so fast that the translation matrix could not keep up. She was experiencing gratitude, concern, fear, and something that looked like admiration, all simultaneously. Jake sat down at his workstation and resumed his simulation as if nothing had happened. Professor Varnak regained consciousness 6 minutes later. He was escorted to the medical bay, where doctors confirmed a mild concussion and a bruised jaw. He was placed on medical leave for 2 weeks. Jake spent the next 3 hours in Dean Valdros Tharn's office. I waited outside the entire time, which surprised me. I was not sure why I stayed. Perhaps I wanted to make sure he was not expelled. Perhaps I simply wanted to know what happened next. He was not expelled. The investigation concluded that Varnak had initiated physical contact first, and that Jake's response was proportional to the threat. He was given a formal warning and placed on academic probation for 1 term. Thalassa submitted a detailed statement describing Varnak's pattern of harassment over the preceding weeks. 3 other students came forward with similar accounts. Varnak returned from medical leave to face a formal disciplinary hearing. He was found to have violated Academy conduct policies regarding instructor-student interactions. He was required to issue a formal apology to Thalassa in front of the entire class and enroll in a mandatory course on cross-species cultural sensitivity, a new program the Academy created specifically in response to the incident. He remained an instructor, though his behavior was noticeably more measured afterward. Jake's probation was quietly rescinded after Varnak's disciplinary outcome was finalized. No one made an announcement. The Academy preferred to handle these matters discreetly. But everyone knew, and the avoidance that had characterized Jake's time at the Academy began to shift. Students who had previously crossed the hall to avoid passing near him now nodded in acknowledgement. A group of Drax students approached him in the cafeteria and formally thanked him for standing up to Varnak. They had experienced similar treatment in previous terms but had been afraid to report it. Jake accepted their thanks with characteristic awkwardness. "I just did what anyone should do," he said. The Drax looked at each other. "No," their spokesperson said. "You did what almost no one would do. That is why we are thanking you." The shift was gradual but real. A group of Ryloth students invited Jake to their cultural festival. Jake accepted, asked polite questions about their traditions, and ate their ceremonial food without comment. The Ryloths were impressed. They had expected him to find their food bland. A Thuran engineering professor asked Jake to assist with a research project involving high-gravity material stress testing. Jake spent 3 weekends in the Thuran lab, operating equipment designed for beings 3 times his size. He did not complain. He did not ask for recognition. He simply did the work and went back to his classes. By the end of the month, Jake had gone from a feared outsider to a respected, if still somewhat unsettling, member of the Academy community. He had not changed. The Academy had changed around him. 1 month passed. The Academy returned to its normal rhythm. Jake and Thalassa continued their studies. I continued my quiet existence in the engineering annex. Professor Varnak was put on probation and allowed to return, but his temporary replacement, a patient Kryn named Instructor Valthos, was such a significant improvement that most students wished the probation had been permanent. Those weeks were good. I did not realize at the time, but looking back, they were the best part of my time at the Academy. Jake would find me in the annex between classes, and we would work on our project together. He helped me optimize a propulsion calculation I had been struggling with for weeks. I helped him understand the cultural significance of certain design choices in Quarren engineering. Thalassa joined us sometimes. The 3 of us would sit in the cafeteria, sharing food from our homeworlds and debating engineering philosophy. Jake argued that all systems should have triple redundancy. Thalassa argued that efficiency was equally important. I argued that neither mattered if the user was too afraid to operate the equipment. A Drax student named Korath joined us occasionally, drawn by Jake's habit of bringing Earth food to share. One afternoon, Instructor Val then approached our table. He smiled stiffly and asked about our class schedules, our upcoming propulsion theory assignment, whether we were finding the curriculum challenging enough. His questions were harmless. His gaze was not. It lingered on Thalassa and Korath a moment longer than necessary, measuring, cataloging. Jake noticed. I saw it in the way his posture shifted almost imperceptibly. But he said nothing. Neither did I. There was nothing specific to say. Instructor Val then left. The conversation resumed. I forgot about the interaction almost immediately. We were happy. We did not know it was about to end. I was in the South Engineering Annex, as usual, working on a propulsion analysis. The first indication that something was wrong was the emergency alarms. They blared through every corridor of Nexus Station, a deep, pulsing tone that indicated imminent threat. The lights shifted to emergency red. The doors locked and unlocked in sequence as the station's security protocols engaged. A synthesized voice announced, "All students report to designated shelter areas." This is not a drill. It was the Zarvon, a faction of disgraced warlords, exiled politicians, and former intelligence operatives from a dozen species who had banded together to rebuild their lost influence. They targeted the Academy because it was full of the children of the powerful. Ransom was their business, and Nexus Station was their biggest score. But I did not know any of that yet. All I knew was that armed soldiers were storming the station where I lived and studied. I froze. This is the Morphak response to danger. We freeze. It is not a choice. It is biology. I stood in the engineering annex, my mind empty, my body unresponsive, as the sounds of combat began echoing through the station. Energy weapons, explosions, screaming. The doors to the annex burst open. Jake stood in the doorway. He was breathing hard. His jacket was smeared with something I did not want to identify. He was carrying a length of metal pipe. "Zarveth," he said, "you need to move." "I cannot," I said. It came out as a whisper. He crossed the room in 3 strides and crouched in front of me. "Listen to me. The Zarvon are boarding the station. They have weapons. They have numbers. But they do not know this station the way you do. You have been here for 3 years. You know every corridor, every maintenance tunnel, every hiding spot. That is valuable." I stared at him. "There are other students hiding throughout the station," he continued. "They are scared. They need someone who knows where to go. You are that someone." "I cannot," I repeated. "I am a Morphak. We do not fight. We flee." "Good. Then flee. But flee strategically. Lead the other students to safe locations. Keep them alive." He squeezed my shoulder. "I am going to find the invaders and introduce them to human engineering. But I need you to handle the evacuation. Can you do that?" I could not. I was certain I could not. But he was looking at me with those predator eyes, and he believed I could. That belief was irrational. It was also compelling. "I will try," I said. "Good enough." He stood up and handed me the pipe. I took it without thinking. "Go to the main maintenance hub on level 4. There's a secure shelter there that is not on any public map. Get as many students as you can and wait for the all clear." "What are you going to do?" He smiled. It was not a reassuring smile. It was the expression a predator makes when it stops running and decides to hunt. "I'm going to the engineering labs." Then he was gone. I stood there, holding the pipe, frozen for another 30 seconds. Then I thought about what he had said. There were students hiding throughout the station. They were scared. I knew where to go. I started moving. The next hour was the most terrifying of my existence. I moved through maintenance tunnels, emergency shafts, and service corridors that I had only ever traversed in theory. I found students from a dozen species huddled in darkened rooms, waiting to die. I told them to follow me. Most of them did. The first group I found was 3 Quran exchange students hiding in a storage closet. Their bioluminescence was flickering in a pattern I recognized as extreme distress. I told them I knew a safe location. They followed without question. The second group was a single Drax student who had barricaded himself in a classroom. He was twice my size and could have crushed me with one hand. When he saw me, he asked if I was leading a rescue. I said yes. He followed. The third group was a mix of 7 students from 5 different species, all hiding in the ventilation system. They had wedged themselves into a junction box and were arguing in whispers about what to do. I told them to stop arguing and follow me. They did. I led them all to the level 4 maintenance hub. The shelter was there, exactly as Jake had described, a reinforced room designed for station personnel during emergencies. It had emergency rations, medical supplies, and a communication terminal that still functioned. I packed the students into that room. Then I went back for more. My third trip through the station took me past the main engineering wing. I was leading a group of 5 Endorian students toward the shelter when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, raising the pipe that Jake had given me. It was Jake. He was carrying a device I did not recognize, a tube with a compressed gas canister attached to it. His jacket was streaked with grease, and his hair was sticking up at odd angles. He looked like he had been pulled through a ventilation shaft. "Zarveth," he said. "Good. I was hoping I would run into you." He reached into his pocket and handed me a small device, a cylindrical object with a button on one end. "Stun grenade. Homemade. Press the button, wait 3 seconds, throw it. It produces a bright flash and a loud noise. Non-lethal. Should disorient any species with standard visual and auditory systems." I stared at the device. "You made a stun grenade. In the engineering lab." "Yes. I made several. Take it. You might need it." I took it. My hand was shaking less than I expected. How many students have you evacuated? He asked. 37 in the first group. 12 more on the second trip. 5 here. That is 54. Good. Keep going. There are more. He started to move past me, then paused. And Zarveth? Yes. If you see any Zarvon, do not engage. Just get the students to safety. Leave the fighting to me. He disappeared around a corner before I could respond. I looked at the stun grenade in my hand. It was warm. It had been built by my friend, the human, in the middle of an invasion, because he trusted me to use it if I had to. I tucked it into my pocket and kept moving. Each trip found more students hiding in darkened rooms, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. They followed me because I moved with purpose, because I seemed to know where I was going, because I was not screaming. I did not tell them I was terrified. I let them believe I was brave. By the time the all-clear sounded, I had evacuated dozens of students from across the station. I had not encountered a single Zarvon soldier. Jake must have cleared the corridors ahead of me. I did not witness what he did during those minutes. But the station's security system recorded everything, and I have reviewed the footage multiple times since that day. It still does not seem real. The Zarvon had brought approximately 200 soldiers. They were armed with military-grade energy weapons, and organized into tactical units. They had taken control of the main docking bay, the central administrative wing, and the primary transportation hub. They had not taken the engineering labs. Jake reached the main engineering lab approximately 15 minutes after the attack began. The lab contained a fully equipped fabrication facility capable of producing almost any component a student might need for their projects. Raw materials, power tools, a functioning industrial replicator. He assessed his resources and began building. His first creation was a projectile launcher, a tube that used compressed gas to propel objects at high velocity. He fabricated it in 11 minutes using scrap materials and a replicated trigger mechanism. His ammunition was the lab supply of ball bearings, which he loaded into canvas pouches that could be rapidly reloaded. His second creation was a set of adhesive traps. He used industrial-grade bonding agent, designed for hull repairs, and sprayed it across several key corridors. The adhesive hardened within seconds, creating surfaces that would trap anyone who stepped on them. His third creation was a sound amplification device. He reconfigured a communications array to produce a specific frequency that he knew from personal experience was painful to most species' auditory systems. He mounted it on a mobile cart and wired it to a portable power supply. His fourth creation was the most ambitious. He accessed the station's environmental control systems and reprogrammed them to selectively target sections occupied by Zarvon forces. He reduced oxygen levels in corridors where he detected their life signs. He increased atmospheric pressure to uncomfortable levels. He diverted thermal energy to raise temperatures beyond what the various Zarvon species could comfortably tolerate. His fifth creation was pure improvisation. He found the medical bay. He located the stores of tranquilizers, fast-acting sedatives used for treating large species in distress. He found a storage room full of maintenance drones, small, wheeled machines designed to clean corridors and transport supplies. Each drone had a basic navigation computer, a manipulation arm, and a battery powerful enough to operate for 12 hours. Jake reprogrammed 6 of them. He loaded their cargo compartments with syringes of sedative. He configured their navigation to seek out the life signs of armed intruders and deploy their payloads on contact, delivering a concentrated dose directly through standard armored joints. He set them loose in the corridors with a single instruction: make them sleep. The drones were not weapons in any conventional sense. They were medical devices. But they were medical devices that could move faster than a walking soldier, fit through gaps too small for armored troops, and deliver a sedative strong enough to drop a fully grown Drax. The Zarvon soldiers found their limbs growing heavy, their vision blurring, their bodies shutting down mid-stride as the drones zipped between their feet and administered dose after dose. The security footage shows Jake watching the drone feeds on his datapad, laughing quietly to himself. That is for making me late to my fabrication lab. Then he went hunting. The security footage shows a lean human male moving through the station's corridors with an economy of motion that suggested extensive training. He carried his projectile launcher across his back, a tool belt around his waist, and a handheld datapad displaying the station's floor plan with Zarvon positions marked in real time. He had hacked their communication network. He knew where every Zarvon soldier was positioned. His first engagement was in Corridor 7 Alpha. 3 Zarvon soldiers were advancing toward the student dormitories. Jake emerged from a maintenance hatch above them, dropped to the floor behind their formation, and fired 3 ball bearings in rapid succession. Each shot struck a Zarvon soldier center mass and punched clean through their armor. The soldiers collapsed, their energy-rated plating offering no defense against a simple steel ball bearing. No species in known space used kinetic projectile weapons anymore. The Zarvon had armored accordingly. It was a fatal oversight. "Sorry about the mess," Jake said to no one in particular. "I will try to keep the collateral damage to a minimum." He continued moving. In Corridor 7 Beta, 4 Zarvon soldiers had set up a security checkpoint. They were checking every door, searching for students. Jake approached from a maintenance tunnel that emerged behind a wall panel. He placed adhesive traps on the floor in their blind spots, then triggered his sound amplifier. The frequency hit the Zarvon soldiers like a physical force. They dropped their weapons and clutched their heads. The broad-spectrum blast was painful to most known auditory systems. 2 of them stepped into the adhesive traps and became stuck. The other 2 stumbled into each other, disoriented. Jake emerged from behind the wall panel. He disarmed them with practiced efficiency, removing their weapons and securing their hands with cable ties. "That is for making me miss my afternoon study session," he said. He continued through the station, leaving a trail of incapacitated Zarvon soldiers behind him. He used adhesive traps to immobilize patrols. He used his sound amplifier to disorient groups. He used his knowledge of the station's layout to appear and disappear at will, always striking from unexpected angles. He mocked them constantly. "You call this an invasion? My grandmother invades the kitchen with more tactical precision. I have seen better formations in a preschool marching exercise. Is your commander aware that you are standing in a vent shaft that I could fill with anesthetic gas at any moment?" He should be. I sent him a message about it. His confidence almost cost him. In Corridor 9 Delta, he encountered a soldier that did not fall to ball bearings alone. The being was a Craxan, a species from a high-gravity death world with dense muscle tissue and thick natural hide beneath their armor. The ball bearings punched through the plating but stopped in the hide beneath. The soldier kept coming. Jake fired again. The Craxan shrugged off the impacts and charged. Jake retreated, reloaded, and aimed for the knee joint. The ball bearing found its mark. The Craxan stumbled but did not fall, dragging his damaged leg forward with single-minded fury. Jake led him into a narrow maintenance corridor with a low ceiling, limiting the Craxan's reach. He laid adhesive traps in his path. The Craxan stepped into the first one and tore his boot free with raw strength. He stepped into the second and did the same. But the third trap bought Jake enough time. He climbed a wall conduit, dropped onto the Craxan's back, and drove a syringe of medical sedative directly into the neck joint beneath the helmet. The Craxan thrashed. Jake held on. The sedative was designed for large species. It took several seconds to work, seconds in which the Craxan slammed Jake against the corridor walls, trying to dislodge him. Jake did not let go. The Craxan collapsed. Jake extracted himself from beneath the unconscious body, retrieved his projectile launcher, and stood up, breathing hard. Note to self, he muttered, "Bring bigger ammunition next time." As he caught his breath, voices drifted through a nearby ventilation grate. 2 Zarvon soldiers were talking, their language rough and guttural. Jake's datapad translated enough. They were discussing their targets by name. Students from influential families. He recognized the first name, Thalassa Vex. Her family were major shipbuilders in Corinth space. The second name was Karath, a Drac student whose father sat on the council. They were looking for both of them specifically. Jake's expression did not change. He filed the information away and kept moving. The Zarvon soldiers were confused. They were demoralized. They were losing to a single unarmed student who was treating their invasion like a game. Their commander, a being who led the Zarvon forces, was not amused. His name was Warlord Threx, and I learned later he was a Redhan, a species known for their aggression and high oxygen metabolism. Threx had established his command post in the main administrative office, Dean Valdros Tharn's office, to be precise. He had taken the Dean hostage and was using the office's communication systems to coordinate his forces. His coordination was becoming increasingly ineffective. Half his soldiers were incapacitated. The other half were reporting sightings of a human in multiple locations simultaneously. The human was everywhere and nowhere, always one step ahead, always striking where they were weakest. "Find him," Threx ordered. "Bring me his head." The Zarvon soldiers tried. They searched every corridor. They checked every room. They swept through the engineering labs, the cafeterias, the libraries. They did not find him because he was not hiding. He was hunting. 30 minutes into the engagement, Jake had incapacitated 47 Zarvon soldiers. He had destroyed their communication relay, disabling their ability to coordinate. He had sabotaged their primary docking connection, preventing reinforcements from boarding. And he had made his way to the main administrative office. The security footage shows him approaching the office from a maintenance corridor that connected to the ventilation system. He removed a vent cover and dropped silently to the floor. The office door was closed. 2 Zarvon guards stood outside. Jake considered his options. He had 3 ball bearings left. He had his sound amplifier, which was running low on power, and he had a length of metal pipe that he had picked up earlier. He chose the pipe. He stepped out of the maintenance corridor, walked directly toward the guards, and said, "I have a delivery for Warlord Threx. It is called a knuckle sandwich." The guards turned. Jake swung the pipe. The first guard caught the blow on his shoulder armor and staggered. The second guard raised his weapon, but Jake was already moving. He dropped the pipe, grabbed the weapon's barrel, and twisted it out of the guard's grip in a motion that seemed to violate several laws of physics. He used the disarmed weapon to strike the first guard in the helmet. The guard collapsed. The second guard attempted to flee. Jake lunged forward, caught his ankle, and pulled. The guard fell. Jake retrieved his pipe and gently tapped the guard's helmet. "Stay down," he said. The guard stayed down. The office door opened. Warlord Threx stood in the doorway, holding Dean Valdros Tarn in front of him as a shield. The Dean was a Kryn, approximately 2 meters tall, his carapace showing signs of rough handling. He looked terrified. "Human," Threx said. "You have caused significant inconvenience." "Thank you," Jake said. "I try." Threx gestured with his weapon. "This ends now. Surrender, or the Dean dies." Jake looked at the Dean. He looked at Threx. He looked at the weapon in Threx's hand. "I do not think so," he said. He dropped his pipe. He dropped his datapad. He spread his empty hands. "You want me? Come get me." Threx shoved the Dean aside. The Kryn stumbled into the office, no longer a hostage, now a witness. The Redhan charged. His high-gravity muscles drove him forward with terrifying speed. His first swing was a crushing blow aimed at Jake's head. Jake was not there. He dropped into a crouch, let the swing pass over him, and drove his fist into Threx's exposed ribs. Not enough to break bone. Enough to hurt. Threx roared and swung again. Jake caught the arm, redirected the momentum, and used it to throw the Redhan off balance. He followed with a kick to the back of Threx's knee, forcing the Warlord down. Threx was still dangerous. He lashed out with his free hand, catching Jake across the chest and sending him stumbling. The human recovered instantly, circling, looking for an opening. "You are fast," Threx admitted. "You are predictable," Jake replied. He feigned a strike to Threx's face. The Redhan raised his guard. Jake dropped low, swept Threx's remaining leg, and drove him to the floor. Threx hit the ground hard. Jake was on him immediately, securing the weapon arm, locking his legs, applying pressure until the Redhan had no leverage left to fight. "Stay down," Jake said. Threx struggled. Jake increased the joint lock pressure. "I said stay down." Threx went still. Jake released the hold and stood up. He looked down at the defeated Warlord. "You invaded the wrong academy, friend. This is an engineering school. We build things. You should have checked what we were building before you came. He turned to the dean. Also, your security protocols need updating. I accessed your biological database from a lab terminal. You might want to fix that. Jake stood there, breathing hard. The office was silent, except for the dean's labored breathing. That, Jake said, was for making me miss my engineering project deadline. Dean Valdros Tarn stared at him. Are you all right, Dean? Jake asked. I am. Unharmed, the dean said. You have saved my life. Jake shrugged. It seemed like the right thing to do. I learned later that the remaining Zarvon forces surrendered within the hour. I learned that Jake had incapacitated 47 of their soldiers and was found sitting in the dean's office eating a ration bar with Warlord Threx unconscious at his feet. I did not see it myself. I was still in the shelter. But the story spread through the station within minutes. By the time I heard it, it had already grown into something close to legend. I returned to the Level 4 maintenance hub with the last group of students I had rescued. The all-clear signal had been broadcast 10 minutes earlier. Students emerged from the shelter, blinking in the restored lighting. Jake was waiting in the corridor outside. He looked tired. His jacket was torn. There was a bruise forming on his cheek. He was holding a ration bar in one hand and a cup of something that steamed. Everyone okay? He asked. Students nodded. Some of them were crying. Some of them were staring at him with expressions I could not read. Good, he said. The cafeterias are open again. I recommend the Koran stew. It is very calming. He walked past me, heading toward the dorms. He paused. Zarveth? Yes? You did good. You saved a lot of people. I opened my mouth to respond, but he was already walking away, eating his ration bar, humming a tune I did not recognize. I stood there in the corridor, surrounded by students I had led to safety, holding a pipe I had never used, and realized something I had never expected to feel. I was proud to be his friend. The Galactic Education Academy reopened 3 weeks later. The damage was repaired. The Zarvon were dealt with. Life returned to something resembling normal. Warlord Threx was tried for war crimes and sentenced to life imprisonment on a council detention world. His forces were dispersed. The Zarvon threat, such as it had been, was neutralized. The Academy's investigation later revealed how the Zarvon had known which students to target. Instructor Val then had provided the student roster in exchange for credits to cover gambling debts. He was arrested, tried, and sentenced to a rehabilitation colony. The Academy quietly revised its security protocols after that. Jake completed his degree in alien engineering with honors, graduating at the top of his class. His thesis on integrating human design principles into standard starship architecture was adopted by 7 major engineering firms within the first year of publication. His final project was a fully functional FTL drive core that he had designed and fabricated from scratch. The faculty review panel gave it the highest marks in Academy history. Dean Valdros Tarn personally presented Jake with his diploma and said, I have this on record, that Jake was the most remarkable student to ever pass through the Academy's halls. Thalassa Vex graduated alongside him. She went on to become one of the leading starship designers in Koran space, known for incorporating human-style redundancy into her designs. She and Jake remained close friends, communicating regularly despite the distance between their worlds. I graduated in the same ceremony. Jake and I stood side by side as our names were called, representatives of 2 species from opposite ends of the civilized galaxy, both holding diplomas from the same institution. He looked uncomfortable in his formal robe. He kept adjusting his collar and glancing at the exit. When they called his name, he walked to the podium, accepted his diploma, and immediately tried to leave. The dean had to stop him for a formal handshake. Then they called my name. I walked to the podium. Jake cheered louder than anyone in the hall. It was embarrassing. It was also the kindest thing anyone had ever done for me. After the ceremony, a Drax student named Karath approached Jake. He was twice Jake's size, a mass of muscle and carapace, and he was crying. You saved my life, he said. When the Zarvon came, I hid in a classroom and waited to die. Zarveth found me and led me to safety because you told him where to go. I owe you everything. Jake looked uncomfortable. He shifted his weight. I just did what anyone should do. No, Karath said. You did what no one else would do. I will remember it for the rest of my life. He clasped Jake's shoulder, a gesture of deep respect among Drax, and walked away. Jake stared after him, then looked at me. That was weird. I smiled. That is the human experience, I said. You save people, and they thank you for it. Apparently, it is very uncomfortable. I returned to Vedas Minor and took a position at the Morphak Institute of Technology, where I teach xenological engineering to students who are, uniformly, less terrifying than Jake Hawkins. I keep a datapad photo of him on my desk. When students ask who he is, I tell them he was my friend at the academy. I do not tell them the full story. They would not believe me. Jake and I stayed in contact for several years after graduation. He took a position at a human engineering firm, designing starship systems that incorporated the best elements of every species he had studied. His designs were unconventional. They were also extraordinarily effective. He sent me schematics sometimes, asking for my opinion. I always gave it. The last message I received from him was a simple note: found a new species in the Outer Rim. They have 6 arms and no concept of personal property. Reminds me of you. Hope you are well. G. I smiled when I read it. He had compared me to a species with 6 arms and no concept of personal property. It was somehow the most complimentary thing he had ever said to me. I think about that day often. Not about the invasion. The violence was unpleasant, and I prefer not to dwell on it. I think about what Jake said to me in the engineering annex when I was frozen and useless. You were that someone. He saw something in me that I had never seen in myself. He saw capability. He saw courage. He saw a person who could rise to the occasion if given the right push. He was right. I did not believe him at the time. I believed I was a coward who would freeze when it mattered most. But when a moment came, I moved. I acted. I saved people. That is the thing about humans. They do not see you for what you are. They see you for what you could be, and they refuse to accept anything less. It is not always comfortable being around them. They are loud. They are unpredictable. They have no respect for personal space. They will clap you on the shoulder, feed you chocolate, hand you a homemade stun grenade, and expect you to rise to an occasion you did not know you were capable of meeting. But they will also believe in you when you do not believe in yourself. And sometimes that belief is enough to make you into the person they always thought you could be. I'm Zarveth Tarn. I'm a Morphak. I am terrified of almost everything, but I am no longer afraid of humans. If anything, I am grateful for them. End of record.